And so it added some new challenges of how do you build a satellite with our partners who can't travel to us and we can't necessarily travel to them. And we figured it out over time, but at first it took a lot of flexibility. We learned how to video conference in the clean room, so our French partners would watch us assemble various parts of the satellite that they had some authority over, and it was really exciting. But it was sometimes difficult to be like, oh, this team in France is the one, are the experts on this thing, but we need to be doing this here in LA or in Pasadena, and it just caused some flexibility. But it was definitely an adventure.
Yes, an adventure worth taking for sure. Yeah. And now we're just starting to see the results. And we got some really great questions over the last couple of weeks from our viewers. And you would just be the perfect person to answer some of these. Are you up for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Okay, great. First question comes from Muhammad on Twitter. Congratulations on a successful in-orbit deployment of SWAT. How long does it take to fully deploy the solar arrays? Is this spring back effect normal in solar array deployment?
But I have to say, I'm not an expert on these solar panels because they were built by our French partners. But the solar panel deployment does have about 2 phases. There's like an initial kickoff. So the solar panels are kind of kick off. And then there's like a spooling, like a wire that gets spooled in, and that deploys the solar panels fully. It takes like 20 to 30 minutes, about in that order of magnitude, to deploy. But that is relatively quick when you want to be very careful in space and make sure these work. But our partners have done this many times, so it's exciting to see that they successfully deploy.
And it takes a little while, doesn't it, Christine? It's not, just automatic in 60 seconds they're deployed. I mean, it does actually take some time, and even some time over the course of days.
Yeah, so we don't always have communication with the satellite, and so you carefully plan activities so that you know that you're going to do really big activities like that one, like deploying a solar panel. You do a lot. You could do preparation for weeks just to do it for like 30 minutes to deploy. And the other part of it is you don't want to break anything, or you don't want anything to snag. With deployables, snagging is always a concern. And so we design away the chance of snagging, but the faster you deploy something, the more likely something is to crack or snag or something. So you want to kind of do it in a controlled way as much as possible. But that initial kickoff is important because you kind of want to get away from the body as quick as possible.
Awesome. Okay, so next question comes from Travis Ramirez on YouTube asking, if you could have included one more instrument or experiment to do with SWAT, what would it be?
Okay, so I'm an engineer. I like engineering and building things. I'm not a scientist, so I don't have a good understanding of what sort of climate science might be the most valuable. But SWAT creates a lot of data, and that data is hard to get to the ground because we can only talk to SWAT during some time. We don't have live streaming from SWAT all the time. And so what I would do is actually add another technology called optical communication to SWAT, which is essentially using lasers to communicate data back to the ground. And that helps us get a higher bandwidth of data to the ground. So I think it'd be really cool to have SWAT communicate with lasers back to the ground. Space lasers are always kind of fun to think about. But that's what I would add. But I'm not a science expert. I'm just an engineer who wants as much data as possible.
I think lasers in any capacity sounds really cool.
Absolutely. And it's a technology that JPL is going to launch on the Psyche mission soon. So it's coming. It just didn't make it on the SWAT.
Great. Next question comes from Rachie on Instagram. What made you want to become an engineer? And do you have any advice for anyone out there who is interested in this field?
Yeah, so I was super, super lucky to be a student in the Girl Scout sailing program in Houston, Texas, as well as a FIRST robotics student. And those two programs, well, sailing taught me aerodynamics and like mechanics of a sailboat, and the robotics taught me engineering and a little bit of that. And so I got exposed to a lot of STEM concepts without even knowing I was being exposed to it. I just thought I was sailing and I didn't know I was learning STEM. And through those programs, I slowly learned that I wanted to be an engineer. Now, the advice I would give to someone is to follow your curiosity. I was really privileged to have access to those programs, but if you're curious about something, follow that curiosity and don't let a lack of skills always stop you. There's plenty of resources online, on YouTube, on all sorts of places where you can learn something, and don't be intimidated that you might not know how to use a tool. Someone is always willing to teach you, or you can maybe find a resource in your library to follow your curiosity and learn the tools you need to follow your curiosity.
So brilliant, Christine. I was a Girl Guide in Canada as well, and so I absolutely loved even just going on nature walks and just getting out there and figuring out what it is that you're passionate about
Yeah.
and what you love.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
we've got some more questions coming in. So, how far from Earth is SWAT? And that's from Akawi Returns on Instagram.
Yeah, so SWAT, as you said, is about 550 miles above Earth. It's kind of in a low Earth orbit, which allows us to collect that really good science data without being too far away.
And is it always going to stay at 550 miles?
Uh, it'll be about there for the rest of its life, but it will switch from like a holding orbit for calibration to a slightly different orbit that lets it see all of Earth's surface water.
Okay. And then we've got another question coming in from Jeremy on Instagram. It's hard to tell from photos how big SWAT is. Can you help us better understand how big this thing is? And it's hard too, because this is the 1/3 model behind me, and you can't even hardly see it because basically it's just the center part of it and it's not everything that's included.
Yeah, so a lot of people will compare it to an SUV before it deploys. So it's about the size of like a really large SUV before it deploys. When I think about it, I think of it more of as like a small school bus. So that's about how it is when it's on the top